The war had been going on for 6,000 years. It was hard to imagine, but the records didn't lie. When the Zytheron swarm first appeared in the outer edges of the galaxy, the Council thought they could stop them quickly. They were wrong. The Galaxy Council represented 847 different species. Some looked like giant insects. Others were clouds of gas that could think. Some lived in water, some in methane atmospheres, and some in the cold vacuum of space itself. They were different in every way possible, but they all agreed on one thing. The Zytheron swarm had to be stopped. The swarm didn't negotiate. It didn't communicate. It just consumed everything in its path. Planets, ships, stations, entire star systems disappeared into the swarm. At first, people thought the swarm ate everything for food. But it was worse than that. The swarm absorbed other species, taking their biological traits and adding them to itself. Every species the swarm consumed made it stronger, smarter, and harder to kill. The Council fought back with everything they had. They built massive fleets of warships. They created weapons that could destroy stars. They developed strategies that had worked in a million other conflicts. And still, slowly but surely, they lost ground. 6,000 years of war changed the galaxy. Species that had millions of worlds were reduced to a handful. Civilizations that had existed for hundreds of thousands of years vanished completely. The Council's population fell from trillions to billions, then to millions in some cases. Children grew up knowing nothing but war. Entire generations lived and died without ever seeing peace. Humanity joined the war only 400 years ago. In galactic terms, humans were babies. They had barely developed faster than light travel when the Council found them. Earth was a single planet with a few small colonies on nearby worlds. The Council almost didn't bother recruiting them, but humans had something the Council needed. They could build things fast. Human factories could produce weapons and ships at incredible speeds. Human workers didn't mind boring, repetitive tasks if it helped the war effort. So the Council gave humanity a simple job: stay in the back, build our supplies, and don't get in the way. The humans agreed, but they weren't happy about it. Human military officers wanted to fight on the front lines. They had ideas about tactics and strategy. But the Council leaders said no. Humans were too new, too unpredictable, too aggressive. Let the older, wiser species handle the actual fighting. So humanity built supply lines. They manufactured ammunition, spare parts, fuel cells, and ration packs. They transported materials across vast distances. It wasn't glorious, but humans threw themselves into the work with the same intensity they brought to everything else. Admiral Chen Wei had spent her entire career in logistics. She was 53 years old, which was young by Council standards but experienced for a human in the war. She had never fired a shot at the enemy, but she had kept 17 different species supplied during critical battles. She knew more about the Council's military operations than most Council generals. 3 days ago, everything changed. Chen was at the logistics hub on Station Kepler 442 when the news came through. The Supreme Fleet, the Council's last major fighting force, had been destroyed. 12,000 ships gone in a single battle. The Zytheron had developed a new adaptation, something that let them turn the Council's own weapons against them. It was the final blow after 6,000 years of slow defeat. Chen watched the Council's emergency session on her command screen. Leaders from hundreds of species filled the holographic chamber. She had never seen them look so broken. The Thelkor ambassador, whose people had fought the swarm for the entire 6,000 years, spoke first. "We have no more options," he said. His translator made his clicking language sound tired. "Our fleets are gone. Our weapons don't work. Our people are dying. We must surrender." The debate lasted 6 hours, but everyone knew how it would end. One by one, each species agreed. Surrender was better than extinction. Maybe the swarm would absorb them peacefully. Maybe some part of their cultures would survive inside the swarm's collective consciousness. It was a thin hope, but it was all they had left. The Council transmitted their surrender to the swarm. For the first time in 6,000 years, the Zytheron responded with something other than violence. The message was simple: surrender accepted. All species must agree. 3 days. That was when the problem started. Chen received the emergency summons 12 hours later. She took a shuttle to the Council's chamber, wondering why a logistics officer was needed for a surrender negotiation. When she arrived, she understood. The holographic display showed the surrender document. 846 species had signed it. One space remained empty, Earth had refused. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Species were shouting at each other in hundreds of languages. Chen made her way to the human delegation area where Ambassador Torres stood looking pale. "What happened?" Chen asked. Torres pulled up a data screen. "Earth's government tried to sign. The AI systems rejected it. They tried manual override, rejected. They tried quantum authentication, rejected. Every single method failed." "I don't understand." "Neither did we, until the AI finally explained." Torres looked at Chen with something like fear. "Do you remember protocol endurance?" Chen felt ice in her stomach. That was 400 years ago, before we joined the council. "It's still active. Still running in every human system, every AI, every government computer." Torres pulled up the ancient document. "Humanity removed its ability to surrender as a species. We can retreat. We can lose battles. Individual soldiers can surrender. Cities can fall. But humanity as a whole, the systems won't allow it." The Thelkor ambassador appeared beside them, his insect-like body trembling with rage. "Explain this madness." Chen stepped forward. She had studied human history as part of her military training. "Before we reached the stars, we fought ourselves for thousands of years. We nearly destroyed our planet multiple times, so we made a decision. We coded it into our deepest systems. Humanity would never surrender as a species again. If 99% voted to give up, the remaining 1% would automatically receive all authority and resources to keep fighting." "That's insane," the Krell matriarch said from across the chamber. "Yes," Chen agreed quietly, "but it worked. We stopped fighting ourselves and reached for the stars instead. We thought we had disabled it when we joined the council. Apparently we were wrong." The Thelkor ambassador's voice rose to a screech. "Then disable it now. You have 3 days." Torres shook his head. "It's in everything. Our genetics, our AI networks, our colony ship computers, our quantum communication systems. It's been spreading and evolving for 400 years. We'd need decades to untangle it, maybe centuries. We certainly can't do it in 3 days." The chamber fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. If Earth didn't surrender, the Zithron would reject the Council's surrender too. They had been clear, all species or none. Chen looked at the faces around her. 846 species waiting for humanity to save them by giving up. One species that literally couldn't. "I'm sorry," she said to the chamber. "Humanity cannot surrender." "Not won't. Cannot." The Thelkor ambassador's translator couldn't capture the sound he made, but Chen didn't need translation. It was the sound of hope dying. The countdown began. 3 days until the Zytheron's patience ran out. 3 days to find a solution that didn't exist. 3 days until everything changed. The first day after the ultimatum was chaos. The council's emergency sessions went on for 18 hours straight. Representatives screamed at each other in every language imaginable. Some species blamed humanity for dooming them all. Others begged Earth to find a way around protocol endurance. A few quietly suggested that maybe the other species should just destroy Earth themselves and surrender without them. Ambassador Torres stood in the human delegation area, looking like he hadn't slept in days. He probably hadn't. Chen brought him coffee, a human habit that had spread to a few other species during the war. "Earth's government is tearing itself apart," Torres said quietly. "Half want to find a way to disable the protocol. The other half say that even if we could, we shouldn't." "Why not?" Chen asked, though she thought she knew the answer. "Because they think the council is making a mistake. That surrender is always a mistake." Torres took a long drink of his coffee. "There's a movement back home. They're saying we should fight." Chen looked at him carefully. "What do you think?" "I think we're going to get everyone killed." Torres set down his cup. "But I also think, I don't know, maybe they have a point." Before Chen could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. The main display showed Zithron forces beginning to move. They were leaving their occupied territories and heading toward council space. Not at attack speed, but purposefully. The message was clear. The deadline was real. The Krell matriarch called for order. Her species was ancient, over 2 million years old. They had survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, and 3 other galactic wars. But now her voice shook as she spoke. "We have 2 more days. Humanity must find a solution, or we will all be destroyed. There are no other options." Chen felt every eye in the chamber turn toward the human delegation. Torres stood up slowly. "There is one option," he said. "Humanity fights." The chamber exploded. Species were shouting, some in anger, others in disbelief. The Thelcor ambassador pushed forward. You have 200 systems. The council once had millions of worlds and we lost. What can you possibly do? We can do what you never did, Torres said. His voice was steady now, like he had made a decision. We can fight a war the way humans fight wars. Explain, the matriarch commanded. Torres pulled up a display. It showed the galaxy with all Zitharon territories marked in red. It was most of the map. Council space was tiny blue dots scattered around the edges. For 6,000 years you fought defensively. You protected your worlds, your people, your territory. Every battle was about holding ground. That's why you lost. You can't win a defensive war against an enemy that grows stronger with every planet it takes. What else could we do? The Thelcor ambassador demanded. Attack. Torres expanded the map. The swarm controls millions of systems now. They have supply lines, breeding grounds, resource centers. They have infrastructure that hasn't been threatened in thousands of years. They think it's safe. Chen suddenly understood what Torres was suggesting. You want to go on the offensive. Not just offensive. Total warfare. We stop defending our territory and start attacking theirs everywhere, all at once. Torres looked around the chamber. Humanity has been building your supply lines for 400 years. We know where everything is. We know Zitharon patterns, their logistics, their weak points. Information you never used because you were too busy defending. This is suicide, the matriarch said. Yes, Torres agreed. But it's suicide that cost them everything. You wanted to surrender because the price of fighting was too high. We're going to make the price of fighting us even higher for them. The chamber went quiet. Chen could see the calculations happening behind hundreds of different eyes. Finally, the Thelcor ambassador spoke. Even if this works, Earth will fall. You know that, yes? You cannot defend your homeworld and attack their territory at the same time. We know, Torres said softly. But maybe we can hurt them badly enough that they'll leave the rest of you alone. Or maybe we'll damage them enough that some other species someday will be able to finish what we start. Why would you do this? The matriarch asked. Why sacrifice everything for species that wanted to keep you in the back lines? Chen found herself answering before she could think. Because someone has to. Because protocol endurance means we have to fight anyway, and because if we're going to die, we might as well make it count. The council took 6 hours to make their decision. In the end, they agreed to let humanity try. They would maintain their surrender offer to the Zitharon but ask for a delay, claiming they needed time to bring humanity into compliance. It might buy a few more days. Meanwhile, humanity would do what humanity did best, escalate beyond all reason. Chen returned to her logistics station and found every human officer already working. The orders from Earth had come through while she was at the council meeting. Protocol Atlas. She had heard rumors about it but never thought it would be activated. What are we looking at? She asked her tactical officer, Lieutenant Park. Park pulled up the fleet disposition. Every human ship is moving. Not to defensive positions, to attack vectors. How many ships do we have? 42,000 combat vessels. Another 100,000 support ships. Park zoomed in on various systems. But that's not the crazy part. Look at the colonies, Chen looked. Every human colony was converting civilian infrastructure to military production. Farming stations were becoming fuel depots. Mining operations were retooling to produce missiles. Civilian transports were being fitted with weapons. They're converting everything, Chen said. Not just converting, weaponizing. Park showed her a report from the colony on Titan. They're turning the ice mines into kinetic bombardment platforms. The ice itself becomes the weapon. And look at New Shanghai. New Shanghai was an agricultural world with 5 billion people. According to the report, they were converting their entire orbital infrastructure into drone factories. Billions of small attack drones, each barely intelligent enough to find a target and explode. This is insane, Chen whispered. This is Protocol Atlas, Park said. Every human system becomes a weapons factory. Every resource becomes ammunition. Every person becomes a soldier or a worker supporting soldiers. Chen pulled up the target list and felt her blood run cold. Human forces weren't planning to defend anything. They had marked thousands of targets deep inside Zitharon space, breeding grounds that hadn't been attacked in millennia. Supply nexuses, communication hubs, resource centers. We can't hold any of these targets, she said. We're not trying to hold them. We're trying to break them. Park pulled up the tactical assessment. Look at the strike team compositions. Most are less than 20 people. Some are just a single ship. They go in because maximum damage and either escape or die trying. This isn't warfare. This is terrorism on a galactic scale. The Council fought with honor for 6,000 years, Park said quietly. Humanity is going to fight to win. Or at least fight to make the swarm wish they'd never met us. Chen sat down heavily. She thought about Earth, about the blue planet she had left 30 years ago to join the logistics corps. She thought about her sister's children who would grow up in a humanity at total war. When do we start? She asked. According to this, strike teams launched 6 hours ago. Park smiled grimly. We already started. The swarm just doesn't know it yet. On the main display, Chen could see Zitharon forces still moving toward Council space. They were powerful, confident, unstoppable. They had no idea what was coming. The second day after the ultimatum started with reports that nobody in the Council wanted to believe. Chen was reviewing supply manifests when the first alert came through. A Zitharon breeding ground in the Carina sector had gone silent. Not destroyed, just silent. The swarm had controlled that nebula for over 4,000 years. It was deep in their territory, supposedly untouchable. 2 hours later, another alert. A resource processing center in the Scutum Centaurus arm had stopped transmitting. Then another. Then 5 more in rapid succession. The Council's monitoring stations tried to figure out what was happening. The Zitharon forces moving toward Council space hadn't changed course. They were still coming, still confident. But something was wrong in their rear territories. Chen pulled up the human strike team reports and started connecting the dots. Strike Team 7 had hit the Carina breeding ground with a biological weapon, not enough to destroy it, but enough to introduce a genetic defect into 30% of new swarm births. The Zitharon would spend months figuring out what happened and years fixing it. Strike Team 19 had collapsed a wormhole junction that the swarm used for faster travel. Now their ships would need an extra 40 light-years of travel time through that entire sector. It wouldn't stop them, but it would slow everything down. Strike Team 42 had infiltrated a swarm communication hub and introduced a virus into their coordination networks. It was subtle, causing just a few seconds of delay in transmissions. But in a species that coordinated billions of units across thousands of light-years, a few seconds of delay was catastrophic. They're not trying to win battles, Lieutenant Park said, looking at the same reports. They're trying to cause problems. Maintenance problems, Chen realized. Every strike creates something the swarm has to fix. And while they're fixing one thing, we hit 10 other places. The genius of it was terrifying. The Council had fought big battles trying to destroy swarm forces completely. Humanity was fighting small battles trying to break things just enough to be annoying. But thousands of small problems added up to one massive crisis. By midday, the Zitharon started responding. They diverted forces away from their advance on Council space, sending them back to investigate the problems in their territory. But every time they sent ships to one location, humans hit 3 other places. The Thelcor ambassador came to the human section of the command station. He looked confused, which was unusual for his species. We're monitoring swarm communications, he said. They're experiencing coordination failures. Small ones, but across hundreds of systems. How are you doing this? Torres pulled up a tactical map. We're not fighting their strength. We're attacking their weaknesses. The swarm is big, but that means they have a lot of infrastructure to maintain. A lot of systems that all have to work together. We're breaking those systems, but you can't win this way. Eventually, they'll adapt. We don't need to win, Torres said. We need to be expensive. Every hour they spend fixing what we broke is an hour they're not advancing. Every ship they send back to defend their territory is a ship that's not attacking you. The ambassador was quiet for a moment. Your people are dying. The strike teams. Most of them won't come back. We know. Torres looked at the casualty reports. 37 strike teams had been destroyed already, over 600 humans dead. But each team that dies leaves behind automated systems that keep fighting. Mines that will activate years from now. Viruses that will spread through swarm networks. We're not just fighting for today. We're fighting for decades from now. Chen watched the strategic display and saw something she had never seen in 6,000 years of Council warfare. The Zitharon advance was slowing down. Not stopping, but definitely slowing. They were confused, uncertain. For the first time, they were reacting instead of acting. In the afternoon, Earth transmitted new orders. Protocol Atlas Phase 2. Chen read them and felt sick. They want us to abandon the outer colonies, she said. Park pulled up the list. 17 human colonies ranging from a few thousand people to millions were being evacuated. Not to safety, there was no safety. They were being moved to other systems where they could continue fighting. The colonies themselves are being converted into weapons, Park said quietly. Once the civilians are evacuated, they're rigging the entire infrastructure to explode or to serve as drone platforms. When the swarm arrives, they'll find traps instead of targets. That's people's homes, Chen said. That's Protocol Atlas. Everything becomes a weapon. Everything serves the war. Park looked at her. Did you think it would be clean? Chen didn't answer. She thought about New Shanghai, the agricultural world where her sister had moved 20 years ago. It was on the evacuation list. 5 billion people being relocated while their planet was turned into a weapons platform. But the strategy was working. By evening, the Zithron advance had stalled completely. Their forces were scattered across hundreds of systems, trying to contain the damage from human attacks. The Council's monitoring showed swarm communication networks overloading with repair requests, damage reports, and coordination failures. The Krell matriarch called an emergency council session. All the species representatives looked stunned. Humanity has done in 2 days what we couldn't do in 6,000 years, she said. They've made the swarm hesitate. At what cost? The Thelcor ambassador asked. We're seeing the reports. Thousands of humans dead. Colonies abandoned. Is this victory? Torres stood up. No, this is war. Real war, not the kind you've been fighting. You tried to minimize casualties, protect your people, preserve your civilizations. That's why you lost. War isn't about preservation. It's about making the enemy pay more than they're willing to spend. So humanity is willing to spend everything? The matriarch asked. We don't have a choice. Protocol endurance means we fight until we're extinct or victorious. There's no middle ground. Torres pulled up human casualty projections. Our analysts estimate that if we continue this strategy, humanity will be extinct within 15 years. Maybe 20 if we're lucky. The chamber went silent. Finally, a representative from the Quellan species spoke. They rarely talked in council sessions, preferring to observe. Then why fight at all? If extinction is certain, why not surrender peacefully? Because extinction was always certain, Torres said. For all of us. The swarm was going to absorb the council. They were going to consume humanity eventually. The only question was whether we'd die quietly or die making them regret ever coming to this galaxy. Chen watched the faces around the chamber. She could see something changing. The council species had accepted surrender because they thought there was no other choice. But humanity was showing them something different. Not victory, but defiance. Not survival, but resistance at any cost. There's something else, Park said quietly to Chen. Look at the swarm's resource allocation. Chen pulled up the data. The Zithron were diverting enormous resources to deal with human attacks. Ships that were supposed to be absorbing council territories were instead chasing human strike teams. Breeding programs were being disrupted. Supply lines were being rerouted. They're spending more on us than we're worth, Chen realized. 200 human systems are costing them more resources than 6,000 years of fighting the council. Because we're not trying to survive. We're trying to be as destructive as possible before we die. Park smiled grimly. Turns out that's really expensive to deal with. That night, Chen couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the strike teams out there. Humans in small ships diving into swarm territory knowing they wouldn't come back. She thought about the colonies being evacuated. People leaving their homes forever to become refugees in a war that humanity couldn't win. But she also thought about the Zithron advance, stalled for the first time in 6,000 years. She thought about the council species, watching humanity do the impossible not through superior technology or numbers, but through sheer willingness to pay any price. Maybe they wouldn't win. Probably they wouldn't. But for the first time since the war began, the swarm was learning that some prey fought back hard enough to make victory taste like defeat. One more day until the deadline. One more day to show the galaxy what humanity meant by protocol endurance. The third day began with silence. Chen arrived at her command station to find every human officer staring at their screens in disbelief. The Zytheron forces that had been advancing on council space had stopped. Completely stopped. They weren't attacking, weren't retreating, just holding position. What happened? Chen asked. Lieutenant Park pulled up the overnight reports. Strike Team 63 found something. A major Zytheron coordination center in the Norma Arm. They didn't just attack it. They downloaded the entire communication archive before they destroyed it. How much data are we talking about? Everything. 6,000 years of swarm coordination patterns, strategic decisions, resource allocations. Park's hands were shaking slightly as he pulled up the analysis. We're running it through our AI systems now. The patterns we're seeing... Admiral, the swarm isn't as unified as we thought. Chen leaned closer. The data showed something incredible. The Zytheron weren't a single consciousness controlling billions of bodies. They were millions of semi-independent nodes that coordinated through constant communication. Break the communication and the swarm became confused. We've been hitting their communication networks all along, Chen said. But we thought we were just slowing them down. We were doing more than that. We were giving them decision paralysis. Park pulled up a simulation. The swarm makes decisions through consensus among billions of nodes. But consensus takes time, and when their communication networks are degraded, it takes even more time. Right now, they're trying to decide how to respond to us, and they can't agree. Torres came running into the command center, still pulling on his jacket. Did you see the council transmission? What transmission? Torres pulled it up on the main screen. It was from the Thelcor ambassador, sent to all council species an hour ago. The message was simple: hold your surrenders. Humanity may have found something. Chen felt a chill. They think we can win? No, Torres said. But they think we might be able to negotiate from a position that isn't complete defeat. The morning council session was different from all the others. The panic was gone, replaced by cautious hope. Representatives who had been screaming at humanity 2 days ago were now asking questions about human tactics and strategy. The Krell matriarch brought up the latest intelligence. Zytheron forces are scattered across 800 systems trying to contain human attacks. Their advance has stopped completely. They're sending messages to each other constantly, but they can't seem to agree on what to do. Because they've never faced an enemy like this, Torres explained. Every species you fought tried to survive. You built defenses, protected territory, minimized casualties. The swarm learned to counter all of that, but humanity isn't trying to survive. We're trying to maximize damage. They don't have a strategy for that. But you're still losing, the Thelcor ambassador pointed out. 53 strike teams destroyed. 8 colonies evacuated. Your casualties are unsustainable. Yes, Torres agreed calmly. But our casualties are predictable and acceptable under Protocol Atlas. The swarm's casualties are mounting and unexpected. That's the difference. We knew the price before we started. They didn't, a Quellan representative stood up. I've been analyzing the resource data. The swarm is spending 17 times more resources fighting humanity than they spent fighting us at our peak. 200 human systems are costing them more than millions of council worlds did. That can't be right, another representative said. It is, the Quellan insisted. The council fought defensive wars. You protected what you had. When you lost a world, it was tragic, but it ended there. Humanity fights offensive wars. When they lose a colony, they leave behind automated systems that continue fighting. When they lose a strike team, they've already seeded that region with weapons that will activate later. Humanity's war doesn't end when they lose. It continues. Chen listened to the debate and realized something. The council was starting to understand. For 6,000 years, they had fought to preserve their civilizations. Humanity was fighting to destroy the enemy's civilization, even if it meant sacrificing their own. That afternoon, Earth transmitted the Phase 3 orders. Chen read them twice, sure she was misunderstanding. They want us to broadcast our tactics, she said to Park. Openly, to everyone, Park nodded. Every strike team strategy, every weapon system, every tactical doctrine. Earth wants us to put it all out there for any species to use. But that means the swarm will see it too. They'll learn how to counter us. That's the point, Torres said, walking up behind them. We're not going to be here forever. Humanity will fall eventually, but if we teach everyone else how to fight like humans, the swarm will face this kind of warfare from every species they try to absorb from now on. You're weaponizing your own tactics, Chen said slowly, making them viral. We're making resistance contagious, Torres corrected. The council surrendered because they thought there was no other option. We're showing them there's always another option. It might not lead to victory, but it leads to making the enemy pay. By evening, the first council species had started adapting human tactics. The Thelcor sent 3 small ships into swarm territory, using human infiltration strategies. The Krell started converting civilian infrastructure into weapons platforms. Even the peaceful Quellan began planning strike missions against swarm logistics. It wasn't coordinated. It wasn't organized. But it was spreading. The Zithron response came at midnight. A transmission broadcast across all frequencies. The first time the swarm had communicated directly with the Council in 6,000 years. Chen and every other officer crowded around the communication station. The message was simple, translated into every Council language simultaneously. Expansion suspended. Absorption suspended. New calculation required. Humanity designation expensive target. Cost-benefit analysis negative value. Query: will humanity cease hostilities if Council absorption cancelled? The command center erupted in chaos. Torres was shouting for quiet, but nobody listened. The swarm was asking for terms. After 6,000 years, they were negotiating. The Council session that followed was the most chaotic in recorded history. Some species wanted to accept immediately. Others wanted to push harder, thinking humanity had found a way to actually defeat the swarm. A few wanted to know what humanity had done that could make an unstoppable force suddenly stop. Chen found herself standing at the human delegation area, looking at Torres and the other human representatives. They looked exhausted, shocked, and somehow unsurprised at the same time. "You knew this might happen," she said quietly. Torres shook his head. "We hoped. The analysis suggested that if we could make ourselves expensive enough, the swarm might calculate that we weren't worth the effort. But we didn't know. We were prepared to fight until extinction. And now? Now we wait for the swarm's full terms." Torres pulled up the communication logs. They're still calculating. The swarm is having a debate across billions of nodes, trying to decide if humanity is worth the cost of eliminating us. The Thelkor ambassador approached them. For the first time since Chen had known him, he looked uncertain. "What did you do to them?" he asked. 6,000 years we fought. 6,000 years they never stopped, never hesitated, never questioned. Then humanity fights for 3 days and suddenly they want to negotiate. We showed them something they'd never seen before, Torres said. An enemy that can't be absorbed profitably. The swarm takes species and adds their strengths to itself. But what strength would they gain from humanity? The ability to fight suicidally? The willingness to destroy everything, including themselves? Those aren't traits the swarm wants. "So you made yourselves poisonous," the ambassador said slowly. "Not through biology, but through culture." "We made ourselves more trouble than we're worth," Torres corrected. "And we made that strategy public so every other species can do the same. The swarm can still absorb the galaxy if it wants, but now every species knows how to make that absorption expensive. The swarm has to calculate, is controlling this territory worth the cost of an endless insurgency?" Chen looked at the strategic display. Human strike teams were still out there, still fighting, still causing damage. Colonies were still being evacuated. The war hadn't stopped. But something had fundamentally changed. The Zatheron had learned that some species were too dangerous to swallow whole. And once that lesson was learned, it couldn't be unlearned. "How long until we hear their decision?" the Krell matriarch asked. "Their last message said 26 hours, Torres replied. "They need to reach consensus across their entire collective. It's not a quick process, 26 hours. Just over 1 day to find out if humanity's gamble had paid off, or if they had simply delayed the inevitable." But in that moment, watching species across the Council starting to adapt human tactics, Chen realized something. It didn't matter what the swarm decided. The galaxy had changed. Resistance wasn't futile anymore. It was just expensive, and now everyone knew the price. 26 hours passed like years. Chen spent most of that time reviewing human casualty reports. 72 strike teams destroyed now, 15 colonies evacuated, 12,000 humans dead. The numbers kept climbing even though the swarm had stopped advancing. Human forces were still out there, still attacking, still following Protocol Atlas orders. She tried to sleep but couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of the strike team commanders she had worked with. Most of them were dead now. They had known they wouldn't come back when they launched. They went anyway. Lieutenant Park found her in the observation deck staring out at the stars. "Earth sent new orders," he said quietly. "Let me guess. Keep fighting? Until we receive a stand-down order directly from the swarm or until we're extinct, whichever comes first." Park sat down beside her. "Did you ever think it would come to this?" When you joined the logistics corps 30 years ago, Chen shook her head. I thought I'd spend my career moving supply crates. Instead, I helped plan the strategy that made the Zitharon swarm blink. We don't know if they're blinking or just calculating a more efficient way to kill us. True. Chen pulled up the galactic map on her datapad. The red of Zitharon territory covered most of the display. Human blue was tiny by comparison. But we made them stop and think. That's more than anyone else managed in 6,000 years. The deadline came at exactly 0800 station time. Every species representative was in the council chamber. The human delegation stood together, Torres in front with Chen and Park behind him. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. They all just watched the communication display, waiting. The Zitharon message came through precisely on time. Consensus achieved. New designation for humanity. Quarantine species. Terms, council absorption canceled. All species maintain current territory. Humanity restricted to current 200 systems. Boundary established. 500 light-year cordon sanitaire. Human vessels crossing boundary will be destroyed. Zitharon vessels will not enter human space. Violation by either party resumes total warfare. Accept or reject within 1 hour. The council chamber exploded into noise. Species were shouting, some in joy, others in confusion. The Thelcor ambassador was clicking so rapidly his translator couldn't keep up. The Krell matriarch was the first to restore order. Silence! Her voice boomed across the chamber. We need to understand what this means. Torres stepped forward. It means the swarm is leaving you alone. They're canceling the absorption. You're free. And humanity? The matriarch asked. We're trapped. 200 systems surrounded by a 500 light-year dead zone. We can't expand. We can't leave. If we try, they'll destroy us and probably restart the war against everyone. Torres looked calm, but Chen could see the tension in his shoulders. We became too expensive to absorb, so they're containing us instead. This is unacceptable, the Thelcor ambassador said. Humanity saved us. We cannot allow you to be imprisoned. You don't have a choice, Torres replied, and neither do we. This is the best outcome we could have hoped for. The council survives. Most species keep their territory. The swarm stops expanding. The only price is that humanity stays in our box. A Quellan representative stood up. But why? Why would the swarm do this? They could still destroy humanity and then absorb us. What changed? Torres pulled up the data from the stolen swarm archive. We ran more analysis overnight. The swarm makes decisions based on resource efficiency. For 6,000 years, absorbing council species was profitable. You had useful traits, technologies, biological adaptations. The cost of conquest was worth the benefit of absorption. He changed the display to show human resistance patterns. But humanity doesn't have anything the swarm wants. Our primary trait is suicidal aggression. Our technology is average. Our biology is standard. And absorbing us would mean dealing with ongoing human resistance forever. Not just military resistance, cultural resistance. We encoded resistance into our deepest systems. We made it genetic, digital, cultural. You can't absorb that without absorbing the poison. So they're cutting their losses, Chen said. Exactly. They're making a calculation. Is it worth spending centuries eradicating every human in every hidden colony, in every infiltration team, when those resources could be used expanding elsewhere? The answer is no. Containing us is cheaper than destroying us. The chamber went quiet. Finally, the Krell matriarch spoke. What about the rest of us? Why not absorb the council and just contain humanity? Because humanity taught you how to fight like humans, Torres said. We made our tactics public. Now every species knows that resistance doesn't have to mean victory. It just has to mean being too expensive to absorb. The swarm is making a different calculation now. Expanding peacefully through trade and negotiation is cheaper than forcing. Absorption on species that might resist, so humanity weaponized the concept of resistance itself. The Quellan representative said slowly, You made it contagious. We made it economically viable, Torres corrected. The swarm can still conquer anyone they want, but now every species knows the price tag for their freedom, and the swarm knows that price might be higher than they want to pay. The vote on accepting the swarm's terms took 30 minutes. Every species voted yes, even humanity, despite knowing what it meant for them. Chen watched Torres cast Earth's vote and saw something in his eyes. Not defeat exactly, but a kind of exhausted acceptance. Humanity had saved the galaxy by sacrificing their own future. They would survive, but they would never expand beyond their current systems. They were effectively extinct as a galactic power, frozen in time within their quarantine zone. After the vote, the celebrations began. Council species were rejoicing, sending messages home that the war was over, that they had survived. But the human delegation was quiet. The Thelcor ambassador approached them later. "I want to thank you. My people have fought this war for 6,000 years. Most of us were born into it. We never thought we would see peace." "You're welcome," Torres said simply. "But I also want to understand. You knew this might happen. You knew humanity might be trapped. Why did you do it?" Torres was quiet for a long moment. "Because someone had to. Because we couldn't surrender anyway. And because—" He looked around the chamber at all the different species celebrating. Because maybe this was the only way it could end. The swarm couldn't be defeated, not really, but they could be taught that some fights aren't worth fighting. The ambassador clicked thoughtfully. "What will your people do now? Trapped in 200 systems?" "The same thing we always do, survive, adapt, build." Torres smiled grimly. "And prepare. Because maybe in 1,000 years or 10,000 something will change. The swarm will move on, or another threat will appear, and humanity will still be here waiting." Chen spent the next few days organizing the withdrawal of human forces. Strike teams were recalled. Colonies were consolidated. The massive military machine that humanity had become was slowly powering down. On the 5th day, she received a personal message from Earth. It was from her sister on New Shanghai. "We heard the news," her sister wrote. "Everyone is celebrating and mourning at the same time. We saved the galaxy, but we trapped ourselves doing it. The government is already talking about what comes next. They're calling it the Long Vigil. Humanity will wait and watch and prepare, because protocol endurance is still active. We still can't surrender, so if we can't expand outward, we'll expand inward. Better technology, better strategies, better everything. And someday maybe our descendants will find a way out of this cage we built." Chen read the message 3 times. Her sister was right. Humanity had traded one impossible situation for another. They couldn't surrender to the swarm, so they fought. Now they couldn't leave their territory, so they would adapt. She thought about protocol endurance, the ancient code that had started all of this. Humanity had removed their ability to surrender as a species. It had saved them and it had doomed them. They were alive but prisoners of their own success. "Admiral," Park called out, "final strike teams are returning to human space. All forces accounted for or confirmed lost. The withdrawal is complete." "Good." Chen stood up, straightening her uniform. "Send a message to all human vessels. Stand down from Protocol Atlas, begin Protocol Vigil." "Protocol Vigil? Long-term defensive posture, monitoring, preparation. We're not fighting anymore, but we're not relaxing either." Chen pulled up the boundary of human space on the display. 500 light-years of empty space in every direction. A prison made of distance. Tell them we're playing the long game now. That night, Chen wrote her own report to Earth. She detailed everything that had happened, every decision, every consequence. She ended with a single observation. Humanity set out to save itself and ended up saving the galaxy. We're trapped now, confined to a tiny corner of space. But we're alive, and we prove something important. Resistance is never futile. It's just expensive. We paid the price. We'll keep paying it. And someday maybe that payment will be enough to buy our freedom. She sent the report and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Zytheron swarm was doing the same calculation they had done before, weighing costs and benefits. Somewhere out there, council species were rebuilding their worlds, grateful for a peace they thought impossible.